Welcome to Planet Raconteur, where we who tell stories rule this world. My name is Yuck Nasty, and I will be your guide to our world that's filled with sights and sounds both wonderful and frightening. Imagine living in a hell that you created. Our first story of the night shows you the way. Here is Making a Dark Lord by Mach.
This is Making a Dark Lord by Mach. Nothing is real. Nothing is forbidden. Everything is real. Everything is forbidden. Everything is real, but you can change everything and forbid what you desire. As above, so below. As below, so above, except for the 40,000 metric kilograms of dirt plus the hot magma. Is it any wonder that every once in a while, vast volcanoes rise up from the center of the earth and wipe out all civilization? God or gods may exist, but they don't need to destroy us, not by flood, not by flame. And the covenant of the rainbow is a child's prism. It fools nobody. You see, the whole thing was a mess. A damned mess. From the beginning to the end. But now we've decided that while we won't have any faith or belief that comforts us, anything that makes us miserable is A-okay. So the best thing is to believe there's nothing out there. The world is a hungry, gaping void. But at the same time, we somehow need meaning, just as we defy its very existence. Why? Because we're humans. And who tortures humans worse than humans? One day, I just walked away from it all. I just shrugged, said I didn't know, said there was no leader or no guru to believe. And from that moment on, I was a monster. And it's a good thing, too, because I will pull down the sky and the sea and the firmament to avoid participating in the lies again. I am a monster and a beast and an indefinable thing. And you can damn well blame yourself and your friends for what I've become. Why? Because you built me. You shaped me. Hell, you even named me. And if in doing so you created something you wish you'd never seen. You see, I was the first golem, shapeless and without form. And you gave me shape, purpose, name, and your gift of hatred. And now I live, and I'm not easily deleted. Do you like what you've made? Of course you do. This is what you wanted, isn't it? This is what you worked for. This is what you planned, surely. Now, I mean, you meant this to happen, right? You didn't send me to rip my way through hell just because you liked the idea that someone with a different opinion from yours would actually go to hell. Because, you see, that would be stupid. That would be weak. That would be fatal. You didn't do that, did you? The end.
Do you get frustrated with your life sometimes? Do you think it could be better? Well, the good news is, a reality exists where your life is whatever you want it to be. Our protagonist in the second story of the night is determined to find his way to his right world. This is Wrong World by Steve J. Myers.
Wrong World by Steve J. Myers. You can see now, Doctor, that I'm not insane. It's all a mistake, right? I mean, yeah, I was naked and screaming, and it took 2 cops to wrestle me down, but that was just a reaction to what happened. Anybody would have acted the same. You can understand that, right? Look, once you know the whole story, you'll see. Look, Saturday I turned 30. 30 years, and I had nothing much. Did nothing much. Was nothing much. I'm even an orphan. I'm a cashier at a supermarket. Slide the item over the barcode reader. Ding. Ring it up. Ding. Swipe the card. Debit or credit. Ding, ding, ding. Great life, right? I live alone in a 1-bedroom apartment. No friends, no girl, nothing. I put all my money in a savings account that pays nearly 0% interest. But I read a lot. Science, theoretical physics, about relativity and quantum mechanics and stuff like that. Not the real technical ones with all that math. Always got a D in math. But the ones that explain it for regular people, interested laymen. Well, a couple books explain string theory and brains and stuff like that. And one shows that the best explanation for quantum weirdness is the fact that there are millions upon millions of parallel universes. It's true. And each time you choose, you create another path to another universe. So if you choose the left fork in the road, there's a universe in which you choose the right. You see? I mean, at first it seems crazy, but the guy, he's a big-time theoretical physicist at a big-time college, Columbia, New York City. He says that that's the only explanation that works. Imagine what that means. Like when I went up to Mary Lou, she's a cashier too. I asked her out and she snorted and laughed. Well, there's a universe where she said yes, and she went out with me, and then she came to my place, and, you get the idea. So, I saw my whole existence as not just my dumb life here, but as a gigantic, nearly infinite tree of happenings of all possible worlds. I tell you, it expands your mind to see not life, but existence. So, the day I turned 30, I said to myself, in some world, I'm rich and I go around draped with beautiful, sexy women, so why not live there? So I walked off the job. I walked away from ding, ding, ding and all those items backing up and women yelling about their milk and cereal and detergent and diapers and the price of this and that and all that. And I went and took all my money out, all $15,016.77. And I got into my 4-year-old Hyundai and I drove over to the Riverboat Casino. I didn't know any card games or dice or stuff like that, but I've seen roulette in movies and on TV, and so I got $5,000 in chips, and I went to a wheel where the limit was $1,000 a bet. And I put $1,000 on 17 because that's my lucky number. And I lost, but I didn't worry because I knew I had to win. But I lost again and again, and I got more chips, and then when I was about finished, 17 hit. And then I tried 23, and that hit. And then 11 hit. And I won over $150,000. I told them I wanted cash, but they said I had to take a check, and there was some IRS stuff and that I had to sign. But I did get $20,000 in cash, and I told them that I would be back the next night. I went over to the bar there and I ordered a vodka martini, and this great-looking redhead with breasts nearly falling out of her dress smiled at me. And the next thing I know, we were drinking together, and I asked her if she wanted to go with me, and she said yes. Man, in my car, she was all over me, and she let me squeeze her breasts. Man, it got really hot. So I pulled into the motel down the road, and I got a room, and in no time she was undressing me. I was standing there naked, and she hadn't even taken off her shoes when there was a knock at the door. She rushed to open it, and this big bald guy came in, and before I could say or do anything, he hit me in the gut. I went straight down. They took my wallet and the check and all my money and my clothes. I got up and ran after them, but they were already pulling off in a big black car. I didn't have my keys, so I didn't know what to do. I couldn't let them get away. I ran after them. I chased them down the highway, and I yelled and screamed. I tried to signal cars to stop and help me, and finally 2 cop cars showed up. But they tried to arrest me. They wouldn't listen. I tried to explain that I've been robbed. I explained about the universes and how this was the wrong one, but, well, here I am. So, you see, Doctor, I'm not crazy. It's all a mistake. This is just the wrong universe. The end.
Our last story of the night will bring to a close our first season of the Planet Raconteur podcast. And we thought it perfect to close season 1 with part 1 of Ignor and Dr. Finklesteam by A.C. Salter.
From the realms of darkest wish, our story tonight, Ignor and Dr. Finklesteam, Part 1, by A.C. Salter. Ignor set the jar of pickled bog sprouts back on the apothecary shelf. His hand was trembling, and the glass chinked against a bottle of nude eyes, causing the small orbs inside to bounce in a cloudy brine. Ignor! The master boomed from across the laboratory. What have I told you about eating the specimens?
Not to eat them, master.
Ignor replied, the words spilling forth from his deformed mouth, each syllable as mangled as the swollen tongue which formed them.
Sorry, master, but they taste divine. That particular jar has matured for almost 30 years and...
No more! Dr. Finklesteam shouted. Ignor's shadow matched his stooped frame as he cringed away from his master, the bloated hump on his back striking a gas lamp and making it swing. The rocking light made strange shapes from the already strange objects that lay about the chamber. I blame myself, the doctor continued, absently tightening the device which held the strange crystal. When I created you, I should have found a smaller mouth, or at the very least, a cadaver with a slighter gullet. And for God's sake, stop picking at your stitches. The thread which held Ignor's hand to his wrist had begun to slip through the neat stitching, leaving a long piece of catgut dangling. If he didn't tie a knot in the end, his hand would simply fall off, like his thumb had days earlier. He left the thread alone and shuffled around the ancient workbench to join his master, his left foot dragging over stone floor and leaving a trail in the dust. A rare smile curved Dr. Finklesteam's crooked mouth straight, watery eyes sparkling beneath brass goggles which he constantly wore. I believe tonight will be the night when all of our worries will come to an end, he said, teasing a finger down the amber diamond at the center of the bench. The storm has arrived, The very electrical charge we need to infuse the crystal. And then, my little Ignor, the world will be mine.
Yes, Master.
Ignor agreed automatically, then remembered the enthusiasm that Dr. Finklesteam required and extended his remaining thumb.
The world will be yours.
Excitement animated the doctor. He skipped over to the dials on the pressure bottles and began to twist them, which equalized the mercury on another device. That, in turn, opened the laboratory roof. Quickly, Ignor, the rod! Extend the rod! Limping to a worn wheel, Ignor began to turn the contraption and extend the silver pole up through the ceiling and out into the night. Instantly, the wind gripped onto it, and the entire pole wobbled at the mercy of the elements. Just think, Ignor. The power of the genie in that diamond will be mine. I can have anything, do anything, and be whatever I desire. Sticking his thumb up once again and grinning so tight that it pulled at the stitches which held his nose, Ignor replied,
Yes, Master. Very good.
Imagine absolute power. The thought is so grand that I don't know where to start first. What would you wish for, Ignor?
A pickled bog sprout?
Dr. Finklesteam paused, turning a dial to fix him with a mystified glare. Bog sprout? But the power is limitless, Ignor. You could have anything at all.
Maybe 2 pickled bog sprouts?
Shaking his head, the master returned to fiddling with the dials, turning the pressure until a series of cylindrical tubes whistled steam through their fluted tops. I sometimes forget, Ignor, that you have yet to experience life outside of this castle, where I, on the other hand, will not waste the potency. I have a heavy heart, and it desires to be sated. Ignor cast a furtive glance to the shelves of specimens. He had what his heart desired at least once a day, sometimes 2. Not that the master would have been happy with that knowledge. Lightning cracked a flickering wedge through the darkness above, illuminating the laboratory better than the gas lamps that hung from the brackets around the cold walls. It was closely followed by a chest-reverberating rumble of thunder. Dr. Finklesteam raised his head and stuck his tongue out to catch the first drops of rain. Tastes like it's going to be a belter, Ignor, he said. Then, drawing his waistcoat tight, strode in the direction of the spiral staircase that would bear him to the roof. He paused before disappearing around the bend. Ignor, give the crystal another polish. I want it gleaming so I can see my face grinning upon its surface.
Yes, Master.
And careful you don't look into it yourself. I don't want you scaring the genie. Ignor shook his head the best he could, his loose ear flapping like the outer leaf of a well-aged cabbage.
No, Master.
With the doctor gone, Ignor shuffled closer to the device on the workbench, biting his tongue in concentration as he delicately unscrewed the brass fitting which clamped it in place. Once loose, he wiggled it free and held it in his palm. It was the size of a hen's egg, although a lot heavier. Expertly cut, the many-sided diamond sparkled under the flickering sky, refracting his own face from 100 different angles. Ugliness staring in, Ignor wondered if the genie inside was staring out. He experimentally tapped on one edge and held it to his ear.
Hello in there. Hello?
Ignor said, but there was no reply, other than the thunder rippling overhead. Shrugging with his one good shoulder, he hobbled to a dust cloth that sat on the God cycle. The same contraption that the master had pedaled to create enough volts to set his dead heart beating. He patted the saddle, trepidation tickling his giblets. He had mixed thoughts about the God cycle. On the one hand, it had given life to his mismatch of various limbs and organs. But on the other, it had brought pain. Swinging a leg over the iron crosspiece, he balanced himself on the seat and began to pedal. The large wheel on back spinning, a dynamo that sparked tiny sparks as the contacts passed magnets. He hummed a nursery rhyme as he worked, polishing the amber diamond. He didn't know where the song came from or how he knew it. After all, he had never ventured further than the castle walls, and the master never sang, but it was lodged in his brain, along with brief snatches of memories that didn't belong to him. The souls that own the original parts to his body may have departed to the next life, yet their flesh remembered. All those experiences his muscles gained, the skills, the capabilities, wrapped up and infused in the network of nerves and cells, which he used to do his master's bidding. Yet he couldn't do any one thing very well. Ignor was sure that when his master dug up the bodies to harvest parts, he stole a left hand from a right-handed person and a right hand from a left-handed person. Why else would he be so clumsy? And the legs, he was sure, came from an orangutan. Maybe, he thought, if the master had only used one body to create him, he would function better. The parts would fit snugly, and there would be little need for all the stitching, which puckered the skin and was constantly coming loose. But then thoughts were dangerous. The master said so, and Dr. Finklesteam was the cleverest person he knew, albeit the only person he knew. Bringing the crystal to his mouth, he breathed on it, fogging up the faces before wiping them clean.
The master is supremely clever,
he whispered, his gaze falling on the box-shaped invention that slept quietly under a blanket in the corner of the chamber. It was a machine that turned lead into gold. A mastery of engineering covered in steaming pipes, whizzing wheels, and mirrors. Dr. Finklesteam had bought as much lead as he could afford, and even stripped it from roofs. They had leaky rafters for a while, but they had piles of gold, tons and tons of the stuff, enough to alter the economics of the world, whatever that was. But when the weather became a problem, and the master set about finding material to fix the roof, he couldn't find any lead. Not a single ounce of the dull gray matter could be located. Ignor chuckled at this memory.
But the master is supremely clever. We have piles of gold, so he invented a machine that turns gold into lead,
he explained, looking into the diamond. That device sat beside the other, gathering dust, with a single slate board hanging between the pair. Written in chalk, scrolled in the master's hand, were the words, "The yin and yang of wealth. Only use in an emergency." Ignor didn't know what that meant, and the master told him that was a good thing. Ignorance is bliss, he would say. The trouble with Dr. Finklesteam is that he's too cleverly successful. His inventions worked so well, they pushed him beyond the boundaries of triumph all the way back into failure. Like the weapon of mass destruction, the acornic bomb, it sat in pieces, cluttering up the shelves in the other corner of the laboratory. A prince from a neighboring country had commissioned the doctor to build a weapon that would annihilate the king, whose armies had been ransacking his lands. Dr. Finklesteam spent an entire month inventing the acornic bomb, a masterful contraption that had the power to split an acorn so precisely that it caused a chain reaction. An explosion with such devastating energy that it would knock buildings and trees flat, while creating a huge mushroom-shaped cloud.
Boom!
Ignor said, spreading his arms wide for enthusiasm. The master had drawn up the blueprints and presented them to the prince, who was more than happy with the idea. But some days later, before the doctor had built the acornic bomb, the prince returned. Apparently, news of the devastating bomb had reached the king, and he had instantly surrendered. The thought of unleashing such devastation on his lands had him calling for immediate peace. And the first thing that was drawn up in the treaty was the prohibition of any weapons of mass destruction.
The acornic bomb was dismantled before it had ever even been made. You see, Dr. Finklesteam is so successful, he fails,
Ignor explained to the crystal. It reminded him of the time when the master built a giant flying bird made from paper and wax. Ignor had watched him through the only window in the lab. It was marvelous, the way the craft rose and fell with the wind, flying high into the big, bright blue sky to glide into cotton-white clouds. It was a sight to behold. And when Dr. Finklesteam came plummeting down because the paper became soggy and the wax gloopy, he had the foresight to learn how to swim, for the lake in which he landed was rather large.
I say landed. The master explained that it was a controlled dive and not a crash like I suggested when he came squelching back into the lab.
Ignorance is bliss. Sometimes the doctor would tell me that he wishes the roles could be reversed, so that he could do mindless tasks without the worry of the next invention that plagued him. The simple life of a carefree underling, instead of having the mind of a genius. Who are you talking to?
Nobody, master,
Ignor replied as he stopped pedaling. The sudden pause in work caused the orangutan muscles to bunch up like coiled spring, his knee joints creaking with the pressure. Talking to yourself is the first sign of madness, Ignor, Dr. Finklesteam explained, a row of magnifying glasses sitting over one of his eyes, making him seem like one of the tiny creatures that you can glimpse through a microscope. It swiveled as he spoke. If only we could swap for a time, Ignor. My head gets so painfully full, and yours is so vastly empty.
Yes, master,
Ignor agreed, as the doctor retreated up the stairs once again.
If only we were to swap for a little time.
The rear wheel of the God cycle was still spinning, and a minute spark arced across the gap to the static on his hairy legs. Ignor yelped as his body involuntarily jolted and his hand shot skyward. He tried his hardest to keep a firm grasp of the crystal, but with it being held in the hand that was missing a thumb, the precious stone shot into the air, turning end over end as it spun to its zenith before tumbling back down. Sucking on his only tooth, Ignor held his breath as he watched the diamond fall. its polished surface reflecting the soft glow and projected the light along the hard floor it was destined for.
No!
Ignor cried as he dived from the god cycle. His bloated ape-like body stretched as he descended, crooked fingers extending to their limits, joints cracking, knuckles popping, stitches tearing. Ignor's jaw bounced from the floor at the same time as the diamond, one making a delicate clink, the other a painful crunch, as he watched the precious stone bounce and floundered after it, slipping his hand beneath to catch it. The point hit his palm, puncturing his skin and sending a fresh shock of pain to join the rest that racked his body. When he slid to a stop, his hump coming to rest by the no-way mirror, he let out the breath he had been holding. If the master found that he had been treating his experiment carelessly, he would have his gizzards pickled. Ignor didn't know what a gizzard was. Like the master said, his mind was empty and full of bliss. But a gizzard sounded like one of those things he most probably needed, and it would almost certainly be painful if pickled. And Ignor was allergic to pain. It always seemed to hurt. Using the edge of the no-way mirror, Ignor struggled to his feet. The mirror was another of Dr. Finklesteam's successful inventions. The mirror that reflected the image 3 times. It somehow altered the viewer's perception, so when you looked into the glass, the image you were presented with was the reflection of the reflection which bounced back. To that end, what you actually glimpsed was the inside of the mirror looking backwards. Or, as Ignor suggested, it did the same as a normal glass window. It was transparent, but in a clever way. The master had not been happy with Ignor's suggestion and called him a fool. An unintelligent nitwit with a head full of bliss. How the doctor envied him. A mind with such empty innocence. Leaving the mirror, Ignor shuffled back to the bench and placed the diamond into the holding device. He screwed the clamps tight and gave the stone a final polish before standing back and admiring his work. His already loose jaw dropped open as if on a slack hinge. The crystal was damaged.
No, not good.
The bottommost tip of the stone had broken off, leaving a jagged edge. What would the master say when he saw it? Feeling his aching heart ratchet up a gear, Ignor searched the floor for the missing piece. The crystal must be whole for it to work. Scurrying through the dust on hands and knees, he probed the cracks and fissures in the cold slabs, searching the area where the diamond had bounced. Yet all he found was a dirty smudge of blood, his own. He realized as he bent low to taste it. Then, bringing his hand closer to his eyes, he found the precious black tip embedded in his palm. Sludgy blood welled around the fragment, making his skin slippery as he attempted to pick it out. But it was lodged beneath the skin. "What's that racket?" Dr. Finklesteam demanded as he returned, his clothes drenched in the deluge that had begun.
Nothing, Master.
Ignor replied, hiding his hand behind his back.
I thought I saw a rat is all.
Rat? The cake should have killed them all.
I haven't seen the cake.
The half-cat, half-snake animal that the doctor had created last year for pest control. It was when he was experimenting with something called the animal gnome, or DNA, a diminutive nip of an animal.
Maybe he found something larger than a rat. There was a bedrock that escaped. Perhaps the bedrock found the cake and ate it.
Dr. Finklesteam wrinkled his nose and adjusted his goggles more firmly on his head.
Well, perhaps, but let's deal with that later. The storm is almost upon us. Have you polished the diamond?
Yes, Master. However...
Good. Now fetch the fairy dust, the goblin finger, and the fiend's fang. The runes will need to be drawn fresh. So don't dally.
But, Master, the diamond...
Now!
Swallowing his words, Ignor set about collecting the various occult objects that his master had spent the previous year collecting. Resolved to the fact that he would explain the damaged crystal later. He was sure it was important.
Well, there you go. Another trip to Planet Raconteur. On behalf of myself and our two fine Raconteurs, Papa Dave and Bobby Anthem, we would like to thank you for listening once again. All of the stories presented on Planet Raconteur are used by permission or are in the public domain. Check out the show notes for details on the authors, their websites, and their other releases. And if you like what we are doing, please subscribe and follow us on all of our social media platforms. The links will be found in those same show notes. Much love, and thank you again for visiting the Planet Raconteur.